Lyra stood still in the grand hall, her hands cold and her heart heavy. She wore a silver gown, smooth and shining like water, but her face showed no joy. Her long dark hair was braided with glowing threads, and her golden eyes looked down at the floor. Everyone around her whispered, their alien voices full of laughter and pity. "This is the one who cannot give children." Someone said, "She's being thrown to a human." Another added with a grin, at the other side of the hall, the human man arrived. His name was Jackson Tell. Strong and quiet, he wore the military uniform of Earth's Peace Alliance. He had been told only yesterday that he was chosen for a political marriage. He had no choice. He was a soldier under orders. Still, when he saw Lyra, he blinked. She was beautiful, even if her face looked like stone. Lyra did not look at him. To her, this was shame, not honor. She was being married off like a tool, not because she was loved, but because her family wanted to hide her failure. Her mother, Lady Vorel, stood tall behind her, famous, powerful, and cold. She had ruled their territory with an iron mind for years, but when the doctors told her that Lyra could not bear children, she stopped calling her daughter. Now Vorel simply wanted Lyra gone. The high priest spoke, but Lyra barely heard. Words like unity, peace, and binding of blood floated through the air. She felt numb, like her body did not belong to her. When Jackson gently reached for her hand, she gave it, but did not lift her head. The priest tied their hands together with a glowing thread of plasma silk. The crowd clapped politely, but no one smiled. This was not a love story, was a contract. After the ceremony, Lyra was taken to the quarters that had been prepared for them. It was a fine house on the edge of the city, half alien, half human. Design. Jackson looked around and dropped his bag in silence. Lyra stayed standing, her eyes on the floor. He cleared his throat. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to," he said softly. She looked up for a second, surprised. She had expected him to demand things, touch, words, control, but he gave her space and went into the other room without another word. That night, Lyra sat by the window. She watched the moon's rise, two glowing eyes in the night sky. Her hands touched her stomach gently. There would never be life there. That truth had been told to her over and over again. "You are a dead branch," her mother once told her. "No fruit will grow from you." Jackson walked past the hallway and saw her silhouette. She looked so small, so quiet. He didn't say anything, just placed a warm drink on the table beside her, then turned and walked away. Lyra stared at the cup, steam rising slowly into the cold night. He knew her favorite blend. How did he know? The next morning, Jackson fixed the small kitchen. The alien tech didn't like human hands, but he worked anyway. Lyra came into the room, unsure of what to say. "You don't need to serve me," she said softly. Jackson smiled. "I'm not, just making breakfast." She paused. "Why are you kind?" He looked at her. "Because this isn't your fault." Those words hit her harder than she expected. No one had ever said that before. Not her teachers, not the doctors, not her own mother. Jackson didn't look at her like she was broken. He looked at her like she was just a person. They sat together that morning for the first time. The silence was not cold anymore. It was calm. Lyra watched him from across the table. She still didn't trust him. Not yet, but something inside her, deep and forgotten. Warm, the news of the marriage spread fast. Alien nobles gossiped behind closed doors. Humans whispered in their combs. "She's infertile," they said. "He's wasting his time." Others laughed. Oh. But the human and the alien girl said nothing. They simply lived, side by side, quietly, gently. Not as husband and wife, not yet, but as two souls walking through the ruins of expectations. Step by step, they walked. And the stars above watched, knowing what was to come would shake to worlds, because something impossible had just begun. Days passed like quiet echoes. Jackson and Lyra lived under one roof, but their words were few. He didn't try to touch her, didn't push her to share her thoughts, and that silence felt strange to Lyra. She had expected discomfort, maybe even anger. But Jackson treated her with a calm kindness, like she wasn't a burden, like she was just herself. She stayed in the west wing of their shared home. He stayed in the east. They crossed paths during morning meals, and sometimes again at night, but their voices were like whispers lost in space. Lyra still felt broken, empty inside. No child, no future, just a name and a contract. Jackson, meanwhile, tried to understand her without pressing too hard. He read reports about her people, their traditions, their shame around infertility. He knew Lyra had been cast aside, yet something in her eyes, even behind all that pain, seemed uncrushed, like a star refusing to go dark. One evening, Lyra sat by the edge of the indoor pond. She liked the sound of the water. It was one of the few things that calmed her. Jackson walked in with 2 warm bowls and paused when he saw her there. "I brought food," he said, setting one beside her before sitting a few steps away. She looked at the bowl, then at him. "You don't have to share with me," she whispered. "I know," Jackson said, "but I want to." They ate in silence. But it was a different kind of quiet now, the kind that didn't hurt. After a few bites, she asked, "Why are you being gentle with me?" Jackson glanced at her, then shrugged lightly. "You're my wife," he said. "Even if the marriage was arranged, I still want to treat you with respect." That night, Lyra returned to her room, but didn't close the door completely. A small gesture, but Jackson noticed the next morning. She asked him what humans did for fun. He laughed softly, surprised by the question. "Well, depends," he replied. "Some play music, some cook, some fight giant alien beasts." She smiled, the smallest curve of her lips. But it was there, and it was real. A week later, Jackson built a small fire pit in the garden. He roasted alien fruit and told her stories of Earth, of oceans and mountains, and flying machines. Lyra listened quietly, her knees pulled to her chest. She had never seen Earth, but the way he spoke made it sound like a dream. "You miss your home?" she asked gently. "Sometimes," he said, looking at the stars. "But I don't regret being here." He looked at her, especially now. The words hung in the air like starlight. Lyra looked away, confused. Her heart beat faster. She wasn't used to affection, at least. Not the kind that didn't come with expectations or judgment. Jackson never once called her barren, never once looked at her like she was worthless. In fact, he looked at her as if she mattered. One night, a storm passed over the city. The power flickered, the sky rumbled. Lyra woke with a start. Memories of childhood panic rushing in. She wrapped a blanket around herself and left her room. Without knocking, she entered Jackson's side of the house. He was sitting on the floor, candles around him, sipping something warm. He looked up in surprise. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. She nodded. "The thunder. It reminds me of being alone." He didn't ask questions, didn't try to pry. He simply pushed a second cup toward her. They sat together, watching the candlelight dance, and for the first time, Lyra spoke about her past. How her mother's voice turned cold after the doctors gave their verdict. How she was hidden from guests, never allowed to join important ceremonies. Jackson listened, not as a soldier, not as a husband, but as a friend. "I was treated like a mistake," Lyra said, voice barely above a whisper. Jackson looked at her and replied, "Then they made a mistake in treating you that way." That made her look at him, truly look, and in that moment, something shifted between them. The wall she had built all her life cracked a little. That night, she didn't go back to her room. She stayed in the common room. By the fire, Jackson placed another blanket over her without a word and sat beside her until she fell asleep. The next day, something strange happened. Lyra reached for his hand when they walked through the market, just for a moment, but Jackson didn't let go. He held her hand gently, letting her take the lead. No one around them mattered. The whispers, the looks, the rumors, none of it reached them anymore. In that small gesture, in that simple touch, a marriage in name only began to become something real. Not because they were told to love, but because they chose to try. And from that choice, something powerful was beginning to grow. Something more impossible than love. Something far, far greater. It started with a pain, a small one, deep in Lyra's side. She didn't think much of it. She had been tired lately more than usual. She told herself it was stress, maybe something she ate, but the feeling didn't go away. Jackson noticed. Before she even said anything, "You've barely touched your food," he said one evening. Lyra gave a weak smile. Just tired. He reached across the table, placing his hand over hers. "Do you want to see a healer?" She shook her head quickly. "It's nothing, really." But in her heart, she wasn't sure. The next morning, she collapsed in the bathing chamber. Jackson found her on the floor, her skin cold and her eyes wide with shock. He picked her up. In his arms, fear rushing through his veins like fire. He called the emergency line, and within minutes, a hover vehicle took them to the nearest clinic. Lyra woke up in a white room, soft lights above her. Jackson was sitting beside her, eyes filled with worry. A female healer, older and with glowing blue skin, entered with a datapad. She looked at both of them and said, "There's something unusual." Lyra sat up slowly, confused. "What do you mean?" she asked. The healer hesitated, then handed her the pad. The screen showed a scan lines, waves, and one tiny blinking light. "A heartbeat. You're pregnant," the healer said. Quietly, Lyra froze. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible." Jackson stood up, staring at the screen. "What?" he asked in shock. "But she was told she can't." The healer nodded. "I've reviewed her medical records myself, infertile since birth. But the child is there, growing, strong," she added, voice trembling slightly. "I don't understand it either, but the tests are clear." Lyra's hands shook as she held the datapad. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she didn't notice. Jackson gently took the pad from her and sat beside her again. "Hey," he whispered. "Look at me." She turned her face toward him, eyes filled with fear. "Is this real?" she asked, voice shaking. He nodded. "It's real." She leaned into his chest. Crying like a storm had broken inside her. Jackson held her close, not saying anything, just keeping her safe. News spread fast. The clinic couldn't keep such a discovery quiet. An infertile alien woman had conceived by a human. Whispers filled the air across the city. Some said it was a miracle. Others called it a lie. Lady Vorel, Lyra's mother, arrived the next day. She did not knock. She stormed through the door like thunder. Lyra was still weak and lying on the couch. Jackson stood to block her path, but Vorel's voice was sharp like a blade. "Move," she said coldly. "This is my daughter." Jackson didn't move. "She's resting," he said firmly. Vorel's eyes narrowed. "What did you do to her, human?" Lyra sat up slowly. "Mother," she said, "please don't shout." But Vorel did not listen. She saw the medical report on the table and picked it up. When she saw the results, her hand began to shake. Then she laughed, but it wasn't happy laughter. It was bitter and cruel. "This is false," she said loudly. "You've tricked the machines. No one in our bloodline has ever reversed infertility." She turned to Jackson, fury in her eyes. "What are you, really? Some human scientist playing God?" Lyra stood up now, her body weak, but her voice firm. "The child is real." "Mother," she said. I felt her heart. Vorel walked closer, eyes burning. Then, without warning, she slapped Lyra across the face. Jackson stepped between them. In an instant, touch her again, he growled, and I won't care who you are. The room fell into silence. Lady Varel stepped back slowly. Eyes wide, Lyra touched her cheek, but she didn't cry. She stood tall. Even as her legs trembled, "Leave," she said to her mother. "You lost the right to call me daughter when you sold me like I was trash." Varel stared at her. This wasn't the broken girl she once knew. This was someone stronger. Someone whole. She said nothing more. She turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. Later that night, Jackson sat beside Lyra in silence. She held her stomach gently. "What if they come for us?" she asked quietly. "They might not want this child to live." Jackson took her hand. "Then we'll protect her." He looked into her golden eyes and said, "We didn't ask for this miracle, but we'll fight for it," and Lyra nodded. For the first time in her life, she felt like she wasn't alone. Inside her, the heartbeat continued, strong and steady. It shouldn't have been possible, but it was happening, and soon. The whole galaxy would know. The silence after her mother left did not last long. By morning, Lyra's name was being spoken in every hall of the capital. Her pregnancy had become a scandal, a mystery, and a threat. The noble houses whispered. Of blasphemy, religious leaders demanded tests. And Lady Voralira's own mother was leading the charge. She called an emergency council meeting. The room was filled with alien lords, scholars, and commanders. "This child is unnatural," Vorel said coldly, standing tall in her violet robes. "This cannot be allowed." Some nodded, afraid. Others stayed quiet, unsure. Only one elder spoke out. Or perhaps, "It is a sign of something greater." Varel turned her eyes on him like fire. "A sign of human contamination," she hissed. She was infertile. Now she carries a hybrid. A possible danger back at their home. Lyra sat near the window. Her hand rested gently on her stomach. Jackson stood beside her, silent. They had heard the news Varel was trying to have the pregnancy declared illegal. If she succeeded, Lyra would be forced into medical separation, and the child would be removed. "I don't understand," Lyra whispered. "She never cared about me before. So why now?" Jackson sat down beside her. "Because now you've become something she can't control." He said, "She fears what you mean." A knock came at the door. A guard handed Jackson a sealed order. He opened it, slowly summons. He said, frowning, "They want us at the council chamber tonight." Lyra looked at him, her face pale. "They're going to try to take the baby." Jackson met her gaze. "Then we don't let them." That evening, they entered the grand chamber. The room was full of cold stares and glowing data pads. Lady Varel sat at the front, her posture perfect, her expression cold as stone. Lyra walked slowly, head high, though fear tightened her chest. Jackson walked beside her, one hand never far. From his weapon, the council leader stood and cleared his throat. "Lyra of House Varel, you are summoned to determine the nature of your pregnancy, and whether it is to be allowed." Lyra took a breath. "The child is mine," she said calmly, "and I will not give her up." Varel stood, her voice rising. "This is not your decision." She snapped. "You carry something unnatural. This could be dangerous." "To our kind," Jackson stepped forward now. "Dangerous," he said. "Or are you just afraid she will prove you wrong?" The council stirred. Varel narrowed her eyes. "You speak without respect," she said. Jackson didn't flinch. "I speak truth," he replied. "You cast your daughter aside for being infertile. And now that she carries life, you want to destroy it." The room went quiet. Varel stepped closer to Lyra now, looking into her eyes. "Give up this child," she said softly, "and you can return home. You'll be safe, cared for." Lyra looked at her mother. Really looked. For the first time, she saw Fiona's strength in those eyes. "You're not offering safety," she said. "You're offering a cage." Varel's hand raised as if to strike her again. But Jackson caught her wrist before it reached Lyra. The guards moved, but stopped when Lyra lifted her voice. "This is my body, my child, and my choice," she said. "I won't be silent anymore." The council leader raised his hand. The room paused. "Enough," he said. "We will vote, one by one." The hands lifted. At first, most were against her. Then, slowly, a few rose in her favor, then another and another, until the room was nearly split, and then the elder who had spoken before stood. "I vote in favor of life," he said, and the final hand tipped the balance, the motion to force. Removal was denied. Lyra and her child would be protected under galactic law. Varel stood frozen, eyes burning with rage. "You bring shame to my name," she said, voice shaking. Lyra stepped forward and replied, "No," she said, "I brought truth to your house." Jackson took her hand, and they walked out together. The doors closed behind them with a deep echo, and outside, beneath the stars, Lyra felt her chest rise with relief. That night, Varel sat alone in her great hall, her servants gone, her walls cold. She stared at a painting of Lyra as a child. Once a symbol of failure, now a symbol of change, and for the first time in years, Lady Varel felt afraid of the future she could no longer control. Peace did not last. The council had ruled in Lyra's favor, but outside the chamber walls, hatred continued to grow. Some called her child a miracle, others called it a threat. There were whispers of rebellion, secret messages passed between noble houses and silent sects. They didn't want the child born. They didn't want proof that humans and aliens could make something new, something powerful. Lyra could feel the tension in the air. Shops fell silent when she walked past. Guards stared longer than usual. Even her old teachers turned their eyes away. And then the messages started arriving. Anonymous warnings left in datapads etched into walls near their home. "End this pregnancy." One read, "Leave before it's too late," said another. Jackson stayed alert. He added extra locks to the doors, set up hidden cameras, and stopped. Letting Lyra leave the house alone, she didn't argue she could feel it too. Something was coming, something dangerous. One night, stone crashed through their window. When Jackson ran outside, he found no one. But the stone had a message carved into its one word, hybrid. Jackson crushed it in his hand, jaw tight. The next morning, he contacted the human embassy, but the officials were slow to act. They said they needed proof. They didn't want to upset the local leaders, especially Lady Varel's allies. Lyra sat on the bed, holding her stomach gently. Her body was growing weaker. The pregnancy was draining her. But she refused to back down. "I'm not leaving." She told Jackson this child deserves to be born where she was created. Jackson nodded, though his heart ached. He knew what kind of danger was rising. And soon it became real. That night, their home was attacked. Flames burst through the lower windows. Alarms screamed. Lyra woke to smoke in the air. Coughing, panicked, Jackson grabbed her hand, wrapped her in a cloak, and guided her through the back door. He shot 2 masked attackers before they could reach the garden wall. Lyra stumbled, holding her stomach. Jackson carried her in his arms. Running through the shadows of the city, he knew one place they might be safe. The abandoned outpost on the moon's edge, half forgotten, but still functional. A place no one would think to look. They left that same night in a stolen cargo ship. Silent and fast. As the city slept, they disappeared into the stars. The outpost was cold and empty. Its walls were cracked, its power flickering, but it had water, heat, and a secure medical unit. Jackson worked day and night to repair the systems. He used what little food he could find and hunted wild animals from the frozen forests nearby. Lyra spent her days resting, her body struggling. Her stomach grew faster than it should have. Doctors had said hybrid pregnancies might be unpredictable, One evening, she felt sharp pain worse than anything before. She screamed, and Jackson rushed to her side. The medical unit ran tests and delivered the words Jackson feared most. "She's not stable," the machine said. "Immediate delivery may be required soon." Jackson looked at Lyra, pale and sweating. "Hold on," he whispered. "Please." "Hold on a little longer," she smiled faintly. "I'm not afraid," she said, "but promise me. If it comes to it, save her, not me." Jackson's hands shook. "No," he said, "I'm going to save both of you." He strengthened the outpost walls, turned the outer fence into a defense grid, but it didn't stop the hunters. They came at night, their ships silent, marked with symbols of Varel's private army. She had denied involvement. But Jackson knew better. This was her doing. She wanted the child gone, no matter the cost. Jackson fought them off with traps and weapons. He shot down drones, disabled bombs, and chased off spies. But they kept coming. Every night, more shadows. In the snow, every night. Closer inside the outpost, Lyra went into early labor. Her screams echoed through the halls as lightning flashed outside. Jackson fought with blood on his hands, then ran back to help deliver the baby. He was exhausted, bruised, wounded, but he didn't stop. The medical unit buzzed, lights flashing red and blue. Jackson held Lyra's hand, whispering her name. Then that last a cry, a small sound, but clear and full of life. A child was born, wrapped in silver light. Part human, part alien, and completely beautiful. Lyra wept as Jackson placed the baby in her arms. "She's real," she whispered. "She's alive." Jackson smiled through tears. "You did it," he said. "You both did, outside." The storm raged, but inside, something greater was born, not just a child, but a future that no one could destroy. Snow fell hard over the old outpost. The storm outside screamed like a wounded beast. But inside, the small baby girl slept peacefully in her mother's arms. Her skin glowed faintly, pale like starlight, her eyes a soft silver. She had her mother's shape, but her father's fire. Jackson stared at her, unable to look away. She was real, she was alive, and she was perfect. Lyra was weak, barely able to sit. Her hair was soaked with sweat, her body bruised and trembling, but she smiled. A quiet smile that Jackson would remember. "Forever, she's everything I thought I'd never have," she whispered. Jackson knelt beside her and kissed her forehead gently. "You gave her life, Lyra," he said. "You're stronger than any warrior I've ever known." But the moment didn't last. The alarms blared again, loud and sharp. Jackson stood and checked the sensors, 3 ships incoming. "Fast, no warning, Varel," he growled under his breath. She wasn't finished, not even after her daughter had given birth. He handed Lyra the emergency signal beacon. "If anything happens to me," he said, "you press this." Lyra looked up at him, eyes wide with fear. "No," she said weakly. "You can't fight alone." Jackson kissed her hand. "I won't let them take her," he said. "Not while I'm still breathing." He went outside as the storm howled. Snow whipped at his face and wind pulled at his coat. He took his rifle, set up the last of his traps, and waited behind the broken transport shell. The enemy ships landed. Shadows moved through the storm figures. In armor, cold and silent, Jackson fired first, taking down 2. The others scattered, returning fire with energy blasts that lit up the sky. Inside, Lyra held the baby close to her chest. She sang a soft melody from her childhood, her voice shaking, but full of love. She didn't know if Jackson would survive the night, but she knew their daughter had to live. That was all that mattered now. Outside, the ground shook as an explosion hit the far wall. Jackson stumbled back, blood dripping from his arm. He ducked behind the metal, breathing heavy. He was outnumbered and running out of time. A cum device crackled in his ear. Human, a voice said. You don't belong here. Jackson smirked. Funny, I was just thinking the same about you. The voice turned colder. Surrender the child, it said. She does not belong to this world. Jackson looked up at the snowy sky and whispered. She belongs to both of us. Then he stood and fired again. Burning light tore through the storm. In the outpost, something changed. Lyra felt it, a warmth pulsing from the child. The baby's glow became brighter. Lights on the walls began to flicker and then stabilize. The old systems powered up one by one. The entire outpost responded. To the child's energy, something ancient had awakened something buried in her blood. A hidden shield system long forgotten lit up above the roof. Blue walls of energy rose around the building. The next blast from the attackers bounced off harmlessly. Jackson stared as the barrier rose. What the hell? He breathed, then he laughed. That's my girl. The attackers hesitated now. They fired again. But nothing broke through. The shield held, and from within the outpost, a message was sent, not just to the capital, but to every major world in the Alliance, a signal. Carrying proof, a child of human and alien blood. Born strong, powerful, and protected by technology that had been silent for 100 years. The attackers fled. They had failed, and they knew if they stayed, the entire galaxy would soon be watching. Jackson returned to the outpost, bloodied but alive. He dropped to his knees beside Lyra. I thought I lost you, she whispered. He shook his head. You saved me, she said, smiling weakly. She did. He looked at the baby, still glowing, still sleeping. For the first time in his life, Jackson felt something he couldn't explain. It wasn't just love. It was awe. It was purpose. The next day, ships from the neutral worlds arrived. They had seen the signal, and they brought protection, medicine, witnesses, and scientists. No one could deny the truth anymore. A new life had begun, a child born of two worlds. A miracle some wanted to destroy, but now the whole galaxy knew, and they would not let her be forgotten. The outpost was quiet now. Snow no longer fell, and the shield hummed gently overhead. Inside, warmth filled the rooms, and in the soft light, Lyra held her child close. Jackson sat beside her, his arm wrapped around them both. They had survived the worst, but the story wasn't over. Not yet. Ships arrived from every corner of the Alliance. Scientists, diplomats, and news crews all came to see the child. The hybrid born from an impossible union. They called her hope. They called her the future. But to Lyra, she was simply her daughter. Small, soft, and full of light among the arriving ships was one Lyra recognized instantly. Its dark purple hull, trimmed in gold, cast a long shadow on the landing field. Lady Varel had come, and this time, she brought no soldiers, only silence. Jackson met her at the entrance. She did not speak at first. She looked at him long and hard, then passed him into the room where Lyra sat. I came to see her, she said softly. Jackson did not move. She doesn't want to see you, he said. Not after what you tried to do, Varel. Lowered her gaze. I know, she replied, but I must try. Jackson stepped aside, slowly. Lyra heard the footsteps before she saw the face. She looked up, tired but strong. Her child lay asleep against her chest. Her mother entered. Not with pride this time, but with hesitation. The mighty matriarch of House Varel. Looked older now, smaller, hollow. For a long time, they said nothing. The fire crackled in the background. Then Varel finally spoke. I thought I was doing what was right, she said, voice thin. I was protecting the name, our bloodline. Our honor. Lyra stared at her. By trying to kill your own grandchild. Varel flinched. Yes, she whispered. It was fear. Not reason. I was afraid that if this child lived, she would prove everything I believed was wrong. Lyra looked down at her baby. She did, she said calmly. She shattered your lies, your rules, your traditions. Vorel walked slowly toward her. She stopped just a few steps away. She is beautiful. She whispered. Lyra said nothing. Her arms tightened slightly around the child. Vorel's knees buckled slowly. She knelt right there on the cold metal floor. Her head bowed. I don't ask for your forgiveness, she said. Only your mercy. Lyra blinked in disbelief. This woman, this powerful, untouchable figure, was kneeling before her, a mother. Now broken, a matriarch. Now humbled, Jackson stepped closer. Unsure, but Lyra raised her hand. I never wanted to destroy you, she said. I only wanted to be seen, to be loved, even if I was born different. Vorel raised her head. Tears in her eyes. I see you now, she said. And I see her. She is not a mistake. Lyra finally relaxed her shoulders. She looked down at the baby, then gently pulled back the blanket. Her name is Alara, she said, half human, half for hell whole heart. Vorel placed one hand over her chest and bowed again to Alara. She whispered. The first of a new kind. News of Vorel's visit spread fast. Pictures of her kneeling before her daughter and granddaughter were seen across 1,000 systems. A same woman who once condemned her child. Now humbled by the truth she couldn't erase. Something shifted in the hearts of the people. For centuries, they believed that mixed blood was weakness. Now, they saw a child born of love, a child glowing with power, and they began to question everything. Soon, scholars from both Earth and alien worlds began working together. Doctors studied Ilara's unique genes. Her DNA held secrets no one had imagined, bridges between species. Possibilities for healing diseases, strengthening future generations. Some said she could be the key to uniting the scattered stars, but to Jackson and Lyra, none of that mattered. They didn't care about fame or history. They just wanted to raise their daughter in peace, to give her the love that Lyra never had as a child. On Ilara's first night under the stars, they sat together outside the outpost. Jackson held Lyra close, and Ilara slept in her arms. The sky above them sparkled. Like a sea of fireflies. I wonder what kind of future she'll build, Lyra whispered. Jackson smiled. Whatever it is, he said, she won't have to do it alone. And somewhere, far away, even Lady Vorel looked up at the stars, and smiled through her tears. Because in losing her pride, she had found something greater. Family, hope, and a reason to believe in a world beyond bloodlines and borders.